Okay, sorry. Yeah, we are live now. We can go ahead with our today's session. Ma'am, with your permission, I am starting with today's session. I hope. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I hope I am audible clearly to all of you. Uh, I am Koel Banerjee, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome you all to the Cultural Studies Research Forum, CSRF, today. As we gather for this insightful session in the first month of this year, I would like to extend a very happy new year to all of our attendees. May 2026 bring you immense growth, curiosity, and academic success. We are thrilled this evening to launch our first public lecture of 2026 and our 54th public lecture overall. Tonight, we are joined by the esteemed guest Ishita Mandal ma'am, who will lead us through a compelling and crucial subject, tracing Gujarati maritime trade and culture through Gunbant Rai Acharya fictional universe. Now, before we proceed, I would like to extend our warm dignity to Kalani Valat ma'am, the director of Valat Education Private Limited, and Anand Haridas sir for their continuous support in our venture. Now, for those who joining us for the first time, let me share a brief introduction to our organization, the CSRF. CSRF is a student-led non-profit organization established in 2022, built upon the conviction that knowledge holds transformative power. We fulfill, uh, sorry, we fulfill this mission by organizing free public lectures and discussion that spans for a diverse cultural spectrum, from literature and art to music to food. Our ultimate goal is to empower students by exposing them to novel ideas, nurturing critical thinking, and cultivating a deeper appreciation for the complex, multifaceted world around us. It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Ishita Mandal ma'am. Ishita Mandal ma'am is a distinguished doctoral scholar at the Department of English, Jamia Millia Islamia. Her academic journey is marked by excellence across India's premier institutions. She completed her MPhil at Jadavpur University, her MA at the University of Delhi, and her BA at Vishwabharati University. Ishita ma'am's research sits at the fascinating interaction of post-colonial literature, diaspora study, oceanic literature. Her current doctoral work focuses on the oceanic migration of the Gujarati Ismaili community in the East Africa. Today, she will be expanding our horizon by discussing the blue humanities and its trajectories, offering us unique insight into the maritime cultures and history that shape our world. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ishita Mandal, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction. Thank you, sir, ma'am, Kalyani Vallat Institution and Cultural Studies Research Forum. So I'll be talking about Gujarati maritime trade through Gunvant Rai Acharya's fictions. I'll be focusing on mostly his novel Darya Lal, which is the most popular amongst his fictional universe. But nevertheless, I'll talk about his other novels as well. So I'll share a PPT. Uh, can you see the PPT? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, so I'll begin. I have divided this PPT into four sections. Firstly, I'll introduce Gujarati maritime trade, and then I'll proceed to introducing Gunvantrai Acharya, and then talk about his novels with a reference to slavery and Indian trading communities involved in slavery, because one of his novels, Daryalal, which is widely popular, talks about slavery in the Indian Ocean coast. So, the title of this talk is Tracing Gujarati Maritime Trade through Gunavant Rai Acharya's fictional universe. Oceanic interactions help us challenge the terrestrial bias in looking at land centric histories and shift our gaze towards oceanic interactions among people, culture, and dynasties. In the Indian Ocean Trade Network, Gujarati traders were active in pre colonial, colonial, and post colonial times. East Africa's business flourished with the active participation of Gujarati dukawalas or shopkeepers and industrialists. Gujarati trade diaspora in East Africa provides valuable insights into the Indian Ocean coastal trade diaspora. About this, there is this fascinating article named Gujarati Business Communities in East African Diaspora, written by Makarant Mehta. He writes, Eurocentric bias restricts our understanding of several business communities active long before colonial encounters. Among the Asian diaspora in East Africa, Gujaratis dominated the business world. Gujaratis were associated with East Africa since the 13th century at least. There are instances of uh, the trade between Gujarat and East Africa much before this, but it flourished from the 13th century. Uh, this business diaspora comprised of different castes and ethnic groups. Here, I should give a disclaimer that business caste identities played a very important role, and it prevailed even in the Muslim business communities like Khoja, Memons, and Bohras. The earliest Gujaratis to migrate were Bhatiyas from Sindh and Kutch. There's a reference of their migration in the 17th century. Bhatiyas were not only experts in maritime trade, but they were also navigational experts, often known for fighting sea pirates, and the sources can be found in Bhatia Prakash as cited by Mehta. Other prominent business communities in East Africa were Lohanas, Khojas, Bohras, and Memons. And as I said, these were it's a complicated amalgamation of caste identity and other religious identities. And my primary research is on Khoja Ismailis, but I'll be talking about other communities here because in Gunvant Rai Acharya's fictions, we find more about Gujarati Hindu Banya communities. There are folklores and myths around these communities. For example, there's this Kutchi person called Kanji Malam. He is known to be a navigator who is claimed to have piloted Vasco da Gama's ship from Malindi to Calicut. They settled in Zanzibar and Pemba along the East African coast. In a while, I'll show you the map, and played a huge role in navigational and mercantile activities in the Indian Ocean. Zanzibar is also notoriously known for the slave trade. The widely accepted timeline might be the 19th century onwards, but there are instances of the slave trade on the Swahili coast much before the 19th century. The Swahili were involved in slave trading networks between the 16th and the 18th centuries, and the captives were mostly from Madagascar. Now I'll show you the map. This is an older map of the Indian Ocean where you can pinpoint Zanzibar here, and here it's Pemba. And so this is a wider map and much early. And this is a recent map of Zanzibar. Here, Zanzibar is here. This is Pemba, and it's part of from 1964. Zanzibar Islands were part of Tanzania. Now Tanzania, then Tanganyika, of course. So, in the literary landscape of Gujarat, Zanzibar is frequently referred to, and we find reference of Zanzibar in Gunwant Rai Acharya's fictions as well. Gujarati traders were also involved in slave trading, but it does not come frequently in the larger historiography of the slave trade in the Indian Ocean. Gunwant Rai Acharya not only brings the Gujarati maritime trade to the forefront through his novels, but also acknowledges the Indian involvement in the slave trade in Zanzibar. Whereas we cannot take his novels to be historically accurate, but I must say his imaginary world is based on certain historical context, which I'll talk about in a while. Now I'll introduce Gunawant Rai Acharya. His timeline is 1900 to 1965. Gunawant Rai Bhai Acharya, grown up in Kutch, Mandvi region in Gujarat, is one of the foremost Gujarati fiction writers who wrote on maritime adventures and cultures. His growing up years in the port town of Mandvi exposed him to different folklores and rich maritime oral traditions of Gujarat and the Indian Ocean. His father worked as a police man, and from his accounts, he also got to know about a lot of pirates, adventurers, and a lot of rogues working in this region. So, that is also one other influence that we can see in his fiction. His novels therefore carry the themes of the sea and history, mostly painted by his imagination on top of the oral narratives on the ships and the sea. Among his 169 books, yes, he wrote 169 books. There were historical novels, adventure novels, short story collections, plays, and so on and so forth. His seafaring adventure novels are most popular. Some of these works include Daryalal, Haji Kasam Tari Vijli, Kalpavruksha, Sarfarosh, and Ratnakar Maharaj. Now, interestingly, Haji Kasam Tari Vijli, it's you can find in several Gujarati movies, theaters, and folk songs. Now, what is this folklore about? This is a sea adventure novel based on the real incident of the ship SS Vaitarana. SS Vaitarana was also known as Vijli. So, Vijli is the name of the ship that got lost in the Indian Ocean much before Titanic. So, Vijli is also called Gujarat's Titanic. So, and Haji Kasam was the captain of this particular ship. So this SS Vaitarana got lost in 1888 with more than 740 passengers on board, and it was sailing from Mandvi to Mumbai. So it's a fascinating folklore which is used by Gunwant Rai Acharya in his Haji Kasam Tari Vijli. Now I'll come to Daryalal. Daryalal was originally written in 1938. It is the most popular among Gunwant Rai Acharya's novels. It was translated into English by Kamal Sanyal in a slightly abridged version by Diktam and Thima in 2000. The plot of Daryalal is set in Zanzibar in the 19th century. Now I'll give a historical context of this. Sultan Sayyid Said of Oman established his capital in Zanzibar in 1840. Indian business communities supported him in his plantation economy, mostly clove plantations and slave trading, mostly by lending money. And this reference of clove plantation is there in this novel prominently. So interestingly, after Sayyid said established his capital in Zanzibar, there was this farman by the Aga Khan of the Ismaili community, and there was this farman that Ismailis in residing in Gujarat, they were asked to go to these East African regions to for trade and commerce. So it's interesting how all these nuances, historical nuances, are connected. Daryalal is set in such a time, especially when the famous explorer H.M. Stanley went to Africa for the second time. Therefore, in the novel, Stanley becomes a significant character. The protagonist of the story or the novel is Ram Jibha, a cruel headman working in the Jairam Shivji business firm who turns out to be a savior after a tragic incident and plays a heroic role in abolishing slavery in Zanzibar. Of course, it's fictional. So I'll talk about the plot a little later, but this is the crux of the story. Ramjiba or Ramji is the protagonist. Whereas the Ramji story is imaginary, the plot context follows a historical base of the abolition of slavery in Zanzibar in 1897. Though this particular year is controversial, and there is this fascinating account written by Judy Aldrich. The name of the book is The Sultan's Spy Master, Pira Devji of Zanzibar. It talks about how even after 1897, slavery continued in Zanzibar for some time. So, yes, and now I'll delve deeper into the plot of the novel. The title of the novel comes from a font name given to the Indian Ocean by the Gujarati traders. There's a reference to this in the novel, and I quote from the book. Daryalal is the pet name the sailors of Kutch and Saurashtra have for the Indian Ocean. The blazing sun of the summer heats up the waters of Daryalal, raising gigantic currents. Then, with the first drops of rain, the ocean becomes quiet, and for the 9 months, Daryalal carries ships like a father carries his child on his arm, lovingly and safely. This is how Daryalal or the Indian Ocean is introduced in the novel Daryalal. The reason for the novel's popularity is not only its translation into English but also the adventures of Ramji, guided by a high moral compass. Throughout the novel, the sea plays more than just a background role. It shapes the people in the coastal areas in various ways. The imaginary Gujarati settlement called suburb of Halar, for example, is a testament to the author's Gujarati roots and a different um, colonial imagination beyond the historical facts. And I quote from the novel, the Thakkars, as the seafaring community was called, heard the call of the sea from birth. They had colonized East Africa, built fortress like houses there, and settled there to trade till this coast came to be known as the suburb of Halar. With reference to this, scholars like Riddhi Shah has come up with this argument that somehow in Daryalal, Acharya tries to establish reverse sort of colonialism by establishing this concept of Hindu Banya colonial entity in East Africa. So there's one argument on this. Though I won't really agree with this argument, nevertheless, there are instances that can support this argument. But overall, if we read the novel, then it guides us to a different direction altogether. Now, Daryala's significance as a novel lies in its addressing of slavery in the Indian Ocean region and the active involvement of the Indian traders in it. And I quote from Riddhisha's article: as opposed to the history of Atlantic slave trading, which has been kept vigorously alive through various means, including the arts, literature, and coverage in the mainstream media, histories of Indian Ocean slavery are conspicuous by their absence in Indian and Gujarati collective memories. And thereby, Acharya's fictions, especially Daryalal, becomes very important in acknowledging this fact. Now, a glossary of Anglo-Indian colloquial words and phrases and of kindred terms. It's a glossary. It also refers to this Banya communities involved in slavery, and I quote, the Banya follows the soldier. The men of this class profess an extravagant respect for animal life, but they became notorious as chief promoters of the slave trade in Eastern Africa. Unquote. Now I'll briefly uh, talk about the plot of the novel. So, Daryalal protagonist, as I already said, Ramjiba, he is a Gujarati slave trader employed by one of the biggest Gujarati slave trading firms in Zanzibar, which is headed by and named after Jairam Shivji. As the novel begins, Ramjiba is on his way to sell kidnapped slaves. As the thirsty and famished kidnapped men who were chained together begin to lag, he orders the group to take a short halt. As the group rests in the shade of a tree, one of the guards spots a rhinoceros nearby and, panicking, shoots the animal. Enraged, it attacks. The slaves attempt to run from the trampling beast. Chained and shackled to each other, they are unable to free. So all there were 20 slaves, all were chained together. Therefore, they could not escape the calamity. All but one of the men fall haplessly before the animal and are killed. Unable to do anything besides look on with horror, Ramjiba witnesses the death of 19 slaves. As he stands frozen in terror, Ramjiba remembers his Vaishnava upbringing. He is a slave trader, but he is also the son of a woman who helped injured animals and a father who forgave dates to help families. Unable to reconcile his choice of profession with his non-violent based upbringing, he vows to never again put a man in the demonic shackles. Amid this epiphany, the 20th man, who has miraculously escaped the rhino, wakes up from his faint. It is not long before Ramjiva realizes that the poor man had been driven mad by the attack and the death of his fellows. This development hammers the final nail in the coffin. Ramjiba decides to not only quit the slave trading but he will not stop until he puts a halt to the entire slave trading enterprise in Zanzibar. As the story further develops, Ramjiba is thrown into the local politics of Zanzibar. He must function from within this framework and deal with other complex characters like Zanzibar's Sultan Said, the thriving slave trading farm, and the arriving of Europeans. Acharya's Daryalal soon becomes a complex narrative of political intrigue, adventure, and just cause. So, this is the plot of the novel, and of course, there are other complexities, but this is the crux of the plot. The story becomes a record of slave trading and the misery of slavery, as I pointed out. There are still certain blind spots in the novel that must be acknowledged. For example, this novel is male centric in its approach. The only woman is put on a pedestal. There's this one woman character called Ruki. She is put on a pedestal and given a goddess like status. But apart from that, the character is not developed that much as the male characters are. And the African tribes are at times shown stereotypically, which, however, cannot be termed as racist, even though they are dealt with without much care. So now I'll conclude by saying that Daryalal becomes important not only because of its depiction of the maritime culture or as an account of the slave trade, but it can also show Gunavant Rai Acharya's distrust of official histories and an imaginary retelling of the same from the point of view of the common folks. Yes. Now I'll invite questions and discussions.
Yes. Thanks, ma'am, for this brilliant presentation. And it was truly eye-opening to see how Gunmanthrai Acharya's stories act as a bridge to understanding the vast Gujarati maritime legacy. You have perfectly demonstrated how the blue humanities can reshape our understanding of history and literature. So I also invite our pupil just to ask their queries, or you can just talk to ma'am anything. Also on YouTube, whoever is watching us, please put their query in the chat box. I mean, YouTube chat box. I will forward it to ma'am. Anyone? Okay, I can see that Rohan sir has joined us. Thank you, Rohan sir. I know you are really a busy person, but uh, after that also you joined, and that's our pleasure. Ishita ma'am, Rohan sir was our, I mean, previous resource person, and he is a Sri
Okay.
Lankan. Yeah, he is from Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Okay, so here is a question I got.
Okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that is Gunmantra Acharya is known for his vivid maritime description. Now, she is asking that in your research, how accurately do you find his fictional maritime universe reflects the actual historical trade routes of the Gujarati Ismaili community?
I won't, I cannot say that Ismaili communities' trade routes can be found. That's why I said that my focus here will be other Banya communities and rather than Ismaili communities, because then I have to refer to other sources. But of course, in the larger Indian Ocean trade routes and to trace Indian Ocean trade route in the 19th century. Kunwant Rai Acharya's fictions can be an eye opener, and especially for other communities, like as I said, Bhatiyas and Lohanas, and the way uh, trade networks worked in Zanzibar. In that respect, I think Acharya's fictions fit properly rather than tracing the trade routes per se. So it's the assimilation, cultural assimilation, slave trade, how it was there in Zanzibar. So all these nuances can be found in his fiction.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope she got her answer. Another question. Why do you think Acharya chose fiction as the medium to document these maritime cultures?
Okay, so as I pointed out earlier, that he grew up in Kachmanvi region, and that's why he was exposed to this folkloric elements, myths related to the ocean and port. And Mandvi was a port city, of course. So that is one of the reasons why he was drawn to the maritime adventures, and he wrote about other aspects as well, but his primary focus was on maritime culture. And I think for me, because of his in his growing years, he was exposed to this sort of culture, stories from his father's friends. As I said, his father used to work in police, and the sentries, from them he got to know about these communities. And I can actually read from the book that this. So here, this is Daryalal, and the cover is fascinating. So I can read from the introduction where it's clear. Um, hmm. Traveling as a child with his father, who was a superintendent in the police force, he spent long hours in the evenings in the small towns and villages, listening to the policemen on sentry duty recounting their encounters with the Vaghairs, Murs, Barots, the brave outlaws carrying on relentless battle against the rich and the mighty all over Kathiawar, Saurashtra, and Kutch. The little boy came to share the admiration the policemen felt for their enemies, the outlaws, who came from the same class as they. A little older, Gunwant Rai came to live in the port town of Mandvi, which was then a prosperous center of trade and commerce. Ships loaded with cargo still sailed from the port to all parts of the globe. Gunwant Rai picked up from the sailors tales about their voyages and the adventures of their ancestors.
So it was, his inspiration. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
And Kanupriya ma'am is here. Thank you, Kanupriya ma'am, for joining us. And she is asking that can you recommend for more novels on the same theme but with a female-centered perspective?
That's a fascinating question, Kanu. I think I have to look into it really. But I'll definitely go back to this question again and come
You
up
can
with.
go back to her directly because you
Of
both are
course.
together. But yeah, thank you, ma'am. And one more question is there that how does the concept of home, in quotation, home, evolve for these maritime communities as they move across the Indian Ocean in these stories?
This is a very good question. In fact, there's this instance in the novel where there's this one woman called Ruki. When she comes, so she is also captured as a slave. So she comes to Zanzibar to find her husband, and she is not able to find, and then is captured by this Arab slave farm, And then these Ramji and his people, they got to know about this particular incident, gets enraged that okay, an Indian woman is captured as a slave, and then rescues her. When she comes with them in the business firm, all the people residing there, they become homesick. They suddenly remember their people back there in India, and somehow Ruki's character is shown to be a recall of some sort. So they immediately feel homesick, and so that's how home comes in their imagination after they encounter this woman character, which is also a nuanced understanding of how often women are associated with home. So, so this is how the novel captures the concept of home.
Thank you, ma'am. And it is for, I mean, from our forum that for students and researchers listening today who are interested in blue humanities mainly, what is the one piece of advice you would like to give them? How to start looking at literature through an oceanic view? So,
So,
what would be your advice?
thank you for this question. I think it is important to look at regional histories, coastal communities, history of these communities thoroughly to understand the huge coastal interactions even before colonial, post-colonial, okay, but even in pre-colonial periods, how these networks worked, and how through these micro histories we can connect or we can connect this micro histories to the larger understanding of colonialism, reverse colonialism, or there are certain communities that are not even now anymore. So, looking at micro histories thus becomes important in understanding oceanic histories, for me at least.
Thank you so much, Pam. I hope people will get it. And I mean, on YouTube, this is recorded, so people can watch it later as well. Okay. So officially, I don't. I mean, if anyone has any question, please ask. Otherwise, we need to wrap it up. Anyone? Okay, ma'am. So that was a truly captivating presentation. By bringing the blue humanities to life through the fictional world of Gunwant Rai Acharya, you have given us a much deeper understanding of the maritime legacy and the cultural fluidity of the Gujarati community, basically. So your research beautifully bridges the gap between historical migration and the literary imagination. As we bring this 54th public lecture to a close, I would like to extend a formal vote of thanks. Thank you, Ishita ma'am, for sharing your time, your meticulous research, and your passion with us this evening. We are leaving this session with many new perspectives to reflect upon. A heartfelt thanks to Dr. Kalani Bharat ma'am and Anand Haridas sir. Your vision and constant support are the backbone of the CSRF, and your opening remarks. I mean, whatever you have told me before starting this session, this set a perfect tone of the year ahead. And thank you to everyone joining us on YouTube and Zoom. Your engagement and thoughtful questions are what make this forum so vibrant. So please stay tuned with us in our social media channels for updates on our upcoming lectures. We look forward to seeing you all over again. And once again, and Happy New Year.
Thank
With your
you.
permission,
Happy
ma'am,
New
I
Year.
am ending up to this session.